We're destroying the environment and we're not preventing the climate change,
Oh my God.
unfortunately. I mean, it would be one thing if it was actually working and stopping climate change, but it's not even doing that.
Namaste. Welcome to the Horses King Show. Now I'm going to do a series of interviews regarding the reality of saving this planet. So this episode is about commercialization of saving this planet. And for this episode, I interviewed Julia Barnes. Julia Barnes is an award-winning filmmaker, and she is very well known for her works like Sea of Life and Bright Green Lies. So let's jump into the interview and see what Julia has to share with us. Also talked about this in your documentary. Can renewables save the planet?
Yeah, it's a great question because we're told all the time that they can and that this is like the be all solution to the problems that we're facing. Particularly climate change is really in the focus right now, and we're told that things like solar panels and wind turbines, if we just invest in these and mass produce these technologies, that's gonna basically stop or seriously curb emissions and solve at least this one major problem. And the reality, when you look into these things, is completely different. For one, there's nothing about these technologies that is good for the planet.
Yeah.
Because this is just another destructive industry. It's based on mining, it's based on extraction of finite materials, yet it's being called renewable.
Right.
And destruction of habitat, burning of fossil fuels at every stage of the production process. There's entire islands that have been mined out of existence to produce some of the materials that go into things like solar panels. There's really dystopian, toxic tailings lakes from the rare earth mining that goes into a lot of these technologies. It's just this hugely destructive industry. And on top of that, when you actually look at the effect that it's having in the real world, adding these technologies to the grid, adding these ways of producing energy, what we're seeing is that energy is being added on top of other sources, and on a global scale, it is in no way displacing things like fossil fuels. So energy demand is growing, and people just, you add another source of energy and we use more energy. We're not using less of other things. So it's not even having an effect on carbon emissions. Carbon emissions are increasing as these so-called green technologies are also increasing. So yeah, it's a really flawed idea that we can just produce a bunch of this stuff and it's going to save the world. This is not what's happening. And the worst thing about it is that we think we're doing something,
Yeah.
We think we're solving these problems by creating these technologies, and meanwhile, everything is just getting worse. And that's really dangerous.
Right. So let's take an example. Imagine if I put a solar panel on my home and I drive an electric car and I have a, what do you call it? Wood toothbrush and a wood pen or a wood glass. So am I saving the planet? What am I doing?
Yeah, looking at things from an individual level, I think we're already kind of missing the point, right? Because we can do everything in our own lives to do something that's to reduce our impact. I can go live in the woods and, certainly slapping a solar panel on your house is not really dramatically reducing your impact. But even if we did everything to live as simply as we could as individuals, that's not addressing, everything else would still be going on. The industries and the corporations would still be carrying out their business and destroying the planet. So I think it's really a problem, and it's really interesting that they have shaped this as an individual, personal lifestyle change kind of thing, because that's probably like the least effective thing that we can do as individuals. Like, we should form groups and we should stand in the way, and we should be stopping the industries that are causing the harm. But instead, we're meant to look at ourselves and blame ourselves and not kind of make the systemic changes that really need to happen. Because the issue is the entire system that is set up, industrial civilization and an infinitely growing economy when we live on a finite planet. All that needs to change.
Right. So what you meant is that it's not about me, what I'm using. It is about collectively what our thoughts are towards this planet, or how we can save or prevent the climate change. Am I right about this? Am I getting it right?
Yeah. Kind of. I mean, I think the best thing that an individual can do for the planet is to not be an individual, right? Like work in a group and try to change things. Yeah, absolutely. On a social level, on a larger level than just yourself. Because you as one person don't actually make that much of an impact. And it's great to reduce your impact on an individual level. I mean, I've tried to do that as much as I can. But the really important thing is to be tackling things on a social level. Yeah.
Right. So back in time, I think in the world or in India, we saw that there were MNCs which came to India, for an example, and they told, okay, so we are going to give you this chemical, and this is going to increase the productivity of your soil. It is going to give you better crops, and you won't have pest problems. Do you see that the same is happening with the solar panels, with the wind turbines, with the electric cars? Are we seeing the same phenomenon going on here, that some MNC comes up with some product which they claim is magic bullet, and they are making huge profit of it, but actually it is damaging the environment?
Yeah, that's completely it. I mean, corporations and industries make these products. They're not necessarily made by people who are in it to save the world. I mean,
Right.
if you really care about the natural world and you look at the process of making a solar panel or a wind turbine, I don't think you can support those things. And the fact that they've been able to label them as green and get buy-in from a lot of the major environmental organizations, and they've pretty much convinced everybody that these things don't cause any harm. They're
Yeah.
zero emissions, they're clean, they're green. That really helps their business, right? They've got the green halo effect going on, and people can feel good about buying their products.
And the same thing happened again, for example, the agriculture, the big MNCs, they got subsidies from government to sell farmers fertilizers and pesticides. And the same thing is happening with our solar panels, at least in India, and I think around the world as well. Even on the electric cars, Indian government is giving huge subsidies on solar panels. And it is the same phenomenon. So our taxes are going, and these guys are profiting out of it. So what is the actual benefit I'm getting? I think it's nothing. It's just they are fooling me with the green label. So what do you think about this?
Absolutely, you've got it right. It's horrible. I mean, to think about the amount of money that is being poured into it. Yeah, at the government level, subsidies and our tax dollars are being invested. And this is counting as, part of commitments to the Paris Agreement. Yeah. Or, addressing climate change. They call it climate action, right? And they're just pouring money into industry, into research and development, into big corporations that are profiting off of the destruction of the natural world, and calling it green. And somehow they've been getting away with it for a very long time, even though it seems really obvious that that this is not what's happening here. This is not a green thing. This is not good for the planet.
Right.
Yeah, it's incredible. There's huge subsidies for things like electric cars, and I find that so strange because, I mean, first off, electricity is not benign. So even if, you plug it in your car and you think there's not emissions, there's emissions involved no matter where the electricity is coming from, right? Whether it's hydro or a lot of it's coming from coal and things like that, natural gas. But then, of course, electric cars, manufacturing them is a really destructive process. The majority of the emissions from a car actually come from the manufacturer of the vehicle rather than driving it.
Right.
More emissions are in the manufacturing process.
So let's take an example. So there is a company who is making electricity out of coal. All right, they are using the coal, which is a fossil fuel, but there are companies which are using rare metals. So we are fine with using rare metals, but we are not fine with burning coal or oil. So what is this thing going on here? I mean, rare metals are, they are renewable or they are green, and coal and oil is not green. How do we look at it?
Sorry. All of the metals that go into these things, I mean, I wouldn't say that they're green. I don't know how you could ever call something a green mine, because mining is just about universally destructive to the natural world and on a really permanent time scale. Like, you look back at some ancient mines, that were just hundreds of years ago, and the area is still toxified from it. Like mines leave a really long-lasting effect. And of course, an area would have to be cleared, or now they're looking at something as destructive as mining the ocean in order to get at the materials for these things. And I mean, that's something that they're saying will probably be necessary for electric cars, would be to mine the deep sea. And that is a hugely destructive industry that is coming down the line. Companies are already investing in this. They've made the technology. They're doing some exploratory mining, but this is something that they're estimating that like each mining vessel would process 2 to 6 million cubic feet of sediment every day, which would then be dumped back into the ocean.
Right.
And so this is going to toxify the entire ocean food web with heavy metals, and it's going to possibly disrupt the plankton who produce most of the oxygen in the air that we breathe. This is just, we don't know fully what the impacts are, but it cannot be good to mess with things on that scale. I hope that industry does not happen, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen. That might just be like the last thing for the ocean that really pushes it over the edge. I mean, it's already so completely like diminished and under assault. Like we've already lost 90% of the large fish, and everything is so messed up already. And then, let's just add this other destructive industry. Oh, and by the way, we're going to call it green.
Yeah, exactly. That we need to look beyond the green washing they are doing, what is actually happening behind the green paint they are putting on our eyes. So these billionaires, these rich folks, what they do is they have big corporations and they are polluting, but they say we are buying, carbon footprint, we are reducing carbon footprint by planting trees. So that is another aspect of calling yourself green, is that you use a renewable source, which is not sustainable. Then people are, the governments, the corporation, and even the normal folks are planting trees to save the planet. So how successful is it? Like, it's just like another compensation model we have in our society, that if somebody dies, you pay an amount of money and that's it, you are done. I think we are behaving the same way with the earth. So if earth is dying, we are planting more trees, and that's our duty, and we are done. I think it's wrong. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think it is a huge problem. You see this obsession with the kind of tree planting, plant trees. And I mean, who could argue with that? It sounds like a good thing. I mean, we've lost so many of the forests, and we definitely need more trees. But it really depends what this is for, and whether this is counted as like an offset, or, like there's so much weird stuff going on. Just first off, I think the most important thing is to realize that protecting a forest that already exists, an intact habitat, is so much more important and better than planting new trees, because like a tiny little young tree, baby sapling, is not doing for the world what an old pre-existing intact ecosystem is doing. And so if we think we can just like cut this great forest over here and then plant 10 new trees over here and say that it evens out. I mean, a lot of schemes like that are happening. Like it's supposed to offset things in some way, or also planting trees and counting that as a carbon offset to allow people to burn fossil fuels elsewhere. We're seeing that a lot. And I mean, it makes no sense, offsetting your carbon by planting a forest, because that forest should have existed anyway and would have been doing its thing anyway.
So you just had a very beautiful point that this planting trees is destroying the environment. Not destroying, it is not really solving the problem, but it is creating problem for other peoples. Somebody's burning fossil fuel there, and other guy is also suffering. So there are places all over the world, I can say that because of our pollution, those guys are suffering. Their water level is rising. Their water level is decreasing in the ground. They don't have fresh water. They don't have a good amount of oxygen. So what are your thoughts on this, that everybody is claiming, every corporation is claiming to, do their part in this area? And it is not just limited to this area. It spreads all over the earth. So why are not we coming together? We came together as Paris Agreement, but we are not really together. Everybody is doing their part. So why are not we able to come together to, to one solution? Okay, let's lower down our emissions and lower down everything and lower down consumption. Why are not we focusing on this part, l- lowering the consumption rather than just consuming renewable? I think because of corporations, but yeah, I mean, why are not the movements which are going on are not talking about lowering the consumption rather than switching to renewable energy?
Yeah, it's strange because I mean, even if so-called renewable energy was good for the planet and did everything that they said that it did, it's still not addressing the root cause of the problem, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely the overconsumption in this entire way of life. And I think the reason that a lot of the big environmental organizations and governments and everybody is really focusing on this renewable stuff is because it's such an easy answer, right? Like you don't have to critique the lifestyle, the way that things are set up. You don't really have to change anything. It's the super easy, like surface level thing that just doesn't challenge the status quo at all. So they go for that.
And make
It
money out
works
of
well.
it.
Like if you're an environmental organization, yeah, people will support that. You're not going to lose your donor base.
Yeah.
Most of their donations, the big ones, come from like foundation funding anyway.
Right.
So
Right.
billionaires and stuff.
Right. And the next question is, for example, Bill Gates, he's building factories for carbon sequestering. So really, I mean, the earth was not working before a billionaire thought of saving the planet. Is it so?
Right, exactly. So we definitely don't need a factory to sequester carbon,
Yeah.
because we actually have the greatest carbon sequestration technology in the world, and it's called forests and prairie grasslands and peat bogs and salt marshes and seagrass beds and fish in the ocean sequester carbon in their bodies. Right. So absolutely, the natural world knows how to do this. It just needs to be allowed to do so. So much of everything that does sequester carbon has been decimated. And if we let that life come back, if we got out of the way, if we stopped destroying it, we could sequester an enormous amount of carbon, probably enough to stave off the worst effects of climate change and ocean acidification. And but you can't profit off that, right? And it would involve stopping a lot of destructive
exactly.
and changing things.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you can build a factory that supposedly sequesters carbon,
you're making money out of it.
That's probably a better business model.
Yeah. Right. It is being said that technology can solve all the problems. So we have Internet of the Things, we have artificial intelligence, which is going to solve all the humanity's problem, be it pollution, be it climate change. Is it true? Or is it just another gimmick to make money?
I think the idea that technology can solve the problems facing the environment is so strange, because the problems that are facing the environment are not caused by a lack of technology. They're caused by the presence of industrial civilization and all the destructive industries that come with that. And these like techno fixes that we're trying to slap on top of all that they're not addressing the cause of the problem. They're not intended to change that. It's completely a lie that we can invent or design our way out of this, that we just need to make a few tweaks to the existing system in order to be sustainable. We have so decimated life on this planet, just in the last few hundred years with the Industrial Revolution and everything that's come with that. And it needs to be stopped. Like, it's really simple. It's not easy, but it is simple to understand that if pulling fish out of the ocean at a rate faster than they can reproduce is causing the decline in fish populations, we need to stop doing that. But that's not the answer that people want to hear. That's not the answer that businesses and corporations want to hear. But it doesn't matter, because nature doesn't care. It's not going to negotiate. It's very clear what needs to be done.
You just mentioned that we need to stop doing, taking a lot of fish out of water rather than thinking of solutions how to efficiently take out the fishes out of water. So I think the problem is we are focusing on the efficiency of doing things, rather than not doing it. Right? So
Yeah.
I think we need to change this thought that we need to make processes more efficient rather than we need to come with this thought that we need to stop everything. So I think this equally applies to saving the planet. So in your documentary, you mentioned about some beach in Mexico, I think, in the Sea of Life, right? So
Right. Yes.
yeah. So even the environmentalists, I think they are focusing on how to efficiently save the earth. And what we can also do is just leave the place the way it is and let the earth do its work. What are your thoughts on this?
So like you mentioned, the place in Mexico called Cabo Pulmo, it was a fishing village for a long time, but they had been fishing so much that there was pretty much nothing left in the ocean. They had wiped out most of the fish. So they decided there really weren't any options left. They were going to just have a complete ban on commercial fishing. And they did that. And within about 10 years, the amount of life in the ocean increased by 450%. I traveled there about 20 years after it was declared a marine protected area, and the ocean was teeming with life. It was thriving. It was absolutely beautiful. So yeah, if we get out of the way, if we stop destroying, absolutely nature can come back. And that's really good to know. And that's like the most hopeful thing in all this is like, I don't think we're too far gone to see things turn around. The interesting thing about efficiency is that what they found, as for example, something like a house has become more efficient, we haven't actually seen a decrease in energy usage or the energy being used to heat or air condition the house. But what we've seen is that housing size has increased because for the same cost, you could have a bigger house because now they're more efficient. So oftentimes, and with pretty much any material usage that we see, is that as things are becoming more efficient, people end up using more of them. You see this with cars. If you got more fuel efficiency,
Planes.
you can drive more and people will take more trips. Exactly. So yeah, there's a huge problem. Like efficiency alone definitely does not lead to conservation of resources.
Right.
Because there's no cap on how much people can use. They just use more. Feel better about it because it's efficient.
I have one last question. To prevent the climate change, are we destroying the environment?
We're destroying the environment and we're not preventing the climate change.
Oh my God.
Unfortunately. I mean, it would be one thing if it was actually working and stopping climate change, but it's not even doing that.
Right.
It's just an additional destructive thing. I mean, it absolutely makes no sense. I don't know why this is still happening. I just think it's really important that we understand what is and isn't a solution because, you know, we have really big and really passionate environmental movement right now. So many people care about the planet. So many people want to change things and see things change for the better. But there's so much marketing going on and so much greenwashing and, you know, convincing people things are good for the planet when they're not, and we don't really have to change things that much. And so I just think we need to be honest with ourselves and with each other about what's happening, about what it's really going to take. And then, yeah, we need to go to work. We need to form groups, form communities, absolutely. You know, work on the kind of self-sufficiency stuff and building the ability to, you know, not be reliant on the current system just for sustenance. Right. And then we also need to go to battle against these destructive industries and, yeah, really, really fight against what's happening because, you know, we can't let this continue any longer. We're in a mass extinction right now, right, caused by industrial civilization. And the dominant solution is to produce more energy to power industrial civilization. Right. We need to circumvent that mentality for sure.
Okay, great. That was really great talking to you, and I got few more ideas from the little conversation we had about efficiency and other things. So thank you so much for giving me your time.
Thank you so much for interviewing me. It was great.